You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the path to holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. Welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. Whether you're looking to enhance your mental, spiritual, or emotional well-being, we're here to guide you every step of the way. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, and joined by resident expert Tara O'Neill. Today, we're absolutely thrilled to have powerhouse in the world of productivity and podcasting joining us. Our guest is none other than Mark Struczewski, also known as Mr. Productivity, MrProductivity.com. The place to find out more about him, which we'll discuss later. Mark has dedicated his career to helping people conquer overwhelm, eliminate distractions, and unlock their full potential. With over 1,200 podcasts and 1,300 on the immediate horizon, the Mr. Productivity podcast, Mark brings a wealth of experience and actual insights to the table. So for the next 45 minutes to an hour, we're going to dive deep into how we can stay on track, manage our time like a pro, and overcome the myths that hold us back from being the most productive selves we can be. Mark's energy is infectious, as you're going to find viewing and listening. His strategies are practical and easy to implement, but they have a huge impact. So this is a conversation you're definitely not going to want to miss. Mark, welcome to the Journey to Yourself podcast. We're glad to have you.
I have been called a lot of things over the course of my 59 years, never a powerhouse. So thank you for swelling my head even bigger than it already is.
I mean, that's incredible. To go off of what I had lined up to start, did you think that you'd ever get to 1,000 seems like such a huge milestone, and you just chugged along 250, almost 300 more than that. When you first started out, was there a goal? Was there a target number that you wanted to hit? Was there a schedule that you had in mind?
No. In the spring of 2017, I happened to came across a video from Gary Vaynerchuk, and he said, the future is voice and audio, and everyone needs to have a podcast. And I typed those fateful words into Google, how do you start a podcast? And I launched it on July 7, 2017, had no idea how long I'd be doing this, over 7 years now. And I just said, I thought it was so cool that I could record on my MacBook in my house in Houston and the world could hear it. And if you would have told me back then that on September 2nd of 2024, you'll have 1,300 episodes, I'm like, no way. That's never going to happen. Most people quit podcasting, as you very well know. And here I am. I'm just so close to 1,300 episodes, and I love this platform because unlike social media, we own the podcast. It's our content, and I think that's, it's so awesome. And the fact that nobody has a podcasting listening party. So we're in people's ears right now. They could be walking the dog, could be on a plane, could be on a car ride. And I think podcasting is so much more intimate than anything else.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point about having the ownership and not having it used by other people or taken, stolen away. That intellectual property piece is really important for people starting out with podcasts. But did Mr. Productivity come first, or was it just the Mark Struczewski show to begin with?
I originally started calling it the Mark Struczewski podcast.
Okay.
And unless you're from my family or from Poland, you'd have no idea what that podcast is even about. And because I believe in coaches, I'm a coach and I believe in being coached. My coach told me to rebrand. Well, they didn't tell me. They suggested I rebranded. And in December 2022, I rebranded it to the Mr. Productivity Podcast. So if you go to my catalog on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, and listen to the episodes prior to December 2022, I do refer it as the Mark Struczewski podcast. I'm not going to re-record all these episodes. The artwork says the Mr. Productivity Podcast, but let's be real. If I tell someone, okay, here's a test, go to markstruczewski.com, go to mrproductivity.com, The only thing I have to worry about MrProductivity.com is they got to spell it out. So on my show, I say MISTER, MrProductivity.com. But Mark Struczewski, they'll go MARKSTRU, and then that's it. It stops right there. So that's why I did the rebranding.
Yeah, on the rebranding note, was 2022 pivotal moment? Was there a time, having had so much success with the podcast, I think it can be very helpful to people, even that aren't in this industry or doing this for whatever reason, hobby or helping people out or as solopreneurs. Was 2022 a pivotal moment with the rebrand? You had learned a lot leading up to that, or were there different moments throughout where you changed something as far as technical with the recording or, show length or topic or distribution? Were there moments that kind of you could definitely tell a difference, episode 417 to episode 418, totally new podcast?
Well, what's interesting is I gotta let your audience know that I did not call myself Mr. Productivity. Someone called me that on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And at that point, I wasn't thinking about getting branded. I mean, we're recording this on August 20th. I just got the official letter from the U.S. Patent Office that I have trademarked and registered Mr. Productivity, which is pretty cool. But thank you. It was not cheap. It was very expensive, but I got it done. But the thing is, when I started my podcast, I went to some mentors. They said, whatever you do, keep it simple in the beginning. So I didn't interview anybody for the first 17 episodes because they said you had enough things going on, recording, microphone, and all stuff, and it wasn't even video back then. And they started doing guest interviews, and I was one of these people where I had a list of questions, and I wasn't an active listener. I was like, okay, that was great, Tara. The next question. I wasn't even listening to what Tara said. One day, I forgot to prepare for one of my episodes, and I just wung it. And what happens, that was the pivotal moment on my show, because then I started letting the conversations happen organically instead of getting through 10, 12 questions. That's why on my website, I don't list suggested questions. I'm on Podmats as you are. I don't list suggested questions because I want the conversation to happen organically. And that really changed everything for me. Now, I've never cared about the length of the podcast because there's something called a pause button on players. And so my shows typically go, now I'm doing video podcasts, they typically go about an hour. But the way I look at it, the episode ends when I think the episode should end. So sometimes they're 45 minutes, sometimes they're 62 minutes. With a pause button, which is not a new invention, ladies and gentlemen, if people ask me, how do you listen to a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast? Well, I hit pause and pick it up later. So I'm not aiming for any sort of length. I'm just trying to provide value as I am on your show today for your audience.
Awesome. That's excellent. A couple times, but Tara, before I let you get in here, early on, you mentioned coaches and mentors and, again, seeking people maybe that have some expertise. It definitely speaks to your humbleness. You've had a lot of success here. Most people burn out, give up, are inconsistent with whatever they're trying to do, a new venture. And especially we see a lot of turnover in this podcast world. So, you never reached a point where you said, I don't really need anyone to tell me what to do, or I've got this figured out. Can you speak to always being open to advice and guidance from others?
Well, when I hired my first coach, I had no idea what a coach was. I'm thinking football, soccer, baseball. Coach, what are you talking about? And then someone suggested a coach, and I said, okay, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But a good coach is a good listener. I've learned this over the years. And what happens is we try to figure things out ourselves. We'll go try to read a book, or we'll go watch some YouTube videos, or follow some influencers on social media. But when you have a coach, you get really specific of what's going on in your life. Where are your struggles? And everybody is struggling. It could be with business. It could be with finances. It could be with your marriage. It doesn't matter. And sometimes you need to go get help from other people. Now, I just love coaches. Now, to be fair, not all coaches are created equal. Some people are more interested in getting certified than actually serving their people. And for me, I think if you truly want to live your best life, and I'm not talking about becoming the next Elon Musk or Bill Gates, multi-billionaire, but if you want to be happy, you're going to need people along the way to help you get to where you want to go. Because I think coaches are the ultimate cheat code of life. Because
Okay.
you hire someone where you're weak in, and they're like, okay, don't do all these things. I did these things. They don't work. Here's a shortcut. Now, you invest in them with spending your money, but then you save years off your journey to wherever you want to go.
Love it. Excellent.
Absolutely. And I would say they're called, we can't see a certain perspective. And so they're called blind spots for a reason, right? So I agree with you completely, Mark. As a hypnotherapist / coach, I find it, I love helping others, and I can see others, the way they maybe can't see themselves, but I can't do that for myself, right? And so the best coaches have their own coaches, have their own mentors, have their own therapists or gurus, whatever title you want to give it. But like that's part of the process, right? Because you're constantly ascending and improving yourself because you have the realization that you can't see your own blind spots. So you have other people help you so you could better help others. Would you agree with that?
100%. I mean, listen, as business owners, whether you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, you can't do everything. I mean, by necessity, when you're first starting out, if you don't have that stuff called cash, you have to figure out how to do it yourself.
Sure.
But as you start getting money through getting clients, then you can start saying, okay, what are the things I'm really good at and I love doing, and I just do these things, and the rest of the stuff I try to have someone else do it. Like in my business, my wife and I work in the business. I'm the face of the brand. I do the podcast interviews. I do the coaching. I do the content creation. But what she does is she takes my podcast interviews and she does all her magic on it. Because I used to hide, and I want your listeners to understand this. When you're good at something, but it's not really moving the needle, it's really easy to go hide behind it. So I'm going to go tweak my website. I'm going to, work on my podcast, or I'm going to create, my TikTok or Instagram profile. Is that really moving the needle, or are you procrastinating, not doing what you should be doing? So I've got I think 3 or 4 things that I do, and this is all I do. My wife will call me out if I stray from the path. So first of all, I am the brand. So I am the host of my podcast. I'm the guest in other people's show. I am the coach to my clients. I'm the content creator, and I also build relationships. So if it doesn't fall in one of those 4 buckets, if I want something changed on my website, I'll say to my wife, hey, I would like this change on my website. She goes and does it. So I think a lot of solopreneurs and small entrepreneurs, we get in their own way. We're control freaks. And I was a huge control freak back in the day. I had to control everything. Well, when you try to control everything, like the saying is, you can't be a jack of all trades because then you're a master of none. So it for me, letting go was very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, that also ties in probably to kind of time management or being productive, right? Because if you are struggling with the back end of a website or trying to create something and then hours are going, and you could have been recording or you could have been writing something down for someone, or like you said, developing a relationship with a client, you're not really utilizing your time, and it's valuable and it's finite, right? So you have to keep yourself in those boxes where I believe the episode, one of the more recent episodes, I used genius. What did you call
The
it?
zone of genius.
Yeah, your zone. You have to know your zone of genius, right? Kind of and stay in that lane, and then find others that have their own zone of genius to support you.
What
about? Go ahead, John.
I was going to ask if you could share with our listeners how you found your zone of genius. Like I know there's the books and all of that, but just like, can you cut like somebody that's doing all the things but kind of avoiding their zone of genius because that's where they have to be vulnerable, that's where they have to be exposed, that could be a little uncomfortable. Like any tips or a direct message that you could send to our listeners that are like doing all the things but maybe it's a little bit avoidance?
For me, I did not discover my zone of genius. I stumbled into it because I didn't know it was called a zone of genius.
Yeah, right.
Because this first coach I had, I remember I was trying to figure out what I wanted to teach people about. You know, I was a failed wedding and portrait photographer, but this is back in 2005 when I was fired from my corporate job. And I was teaching people how to take better pictures, but I didn't want to do that anymore. And I'm on a call with this coach, and I'm like, I normally identify as Tigger, but I was having an Eeyore moment.
Oh,
And he was going, "What's going on?" I'm like, I love teaching and I love speaking, which is ironic because in high school and college I didn't want to speak in front of an empty room. And he goes, "Well, why don't you talk about productivity?" And I remember saying to him, "That's weird. Why would you say that? Where did that come from?" He goes, "I know a lot of people. You are naturally gifted at being productive, so you should share that gift with the world." And I remember saying to him, when you have a gift, it comes so easy to you. You're like, who's going to pay me to be a productivity expert? But the more I got into it, I'm like, oh, this is so easy for me. It's not work. And like I said, I stumbled into it. But more importantly, someone else had to see that in me. I didn't like read a book and I'm like, finish a paragraph and go, there's my zone of genius. Most times, like nicknames, somebody else has to give you a nickname. It's weird to give yourself a nickname. And someone else, more often than not, and Terry, you may disagree or agree with me, I don't know. I think other people see your zone of genius before you do. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like the paradox or the irony is doing your zone of genius feels so easy, almost too easy. But like to get there, it feels really difficult to just accept that it's easy to do, just be you. Like it's hard, a little bit hard to explain, but I think you worded it perfectly. And yes, I think people are like, well, what do you mean you don't know what you're doing? Like you're doing it great. Like you're doing it already. I find that for me as well. Like I was doing it, right? Like I'm a great listener. I'm really good, mindset and a coach and hypnotherapist. And I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? And it's like, well, you're doing it, right? And so, but that I know how to do it. It's so easy. Like, oh no, like I got to do something harder. And I think that in our culture, it's like if you're not suffering or like no pain, no gain, then there's that mixed message, like that it has to be a struggle. And it's like actually, it's not. It doesn't have to be. And it's like that's a beautiful message that I feel like you send to our listeners now, but also your listeners. So thank you.
Well, I want to say this, that I'm a big sports guy, and my favorite sport is European football. In the States, we call it soccer. So let's say you take Lionel Messi, one of the best footballers ever played the sport. You say, you know what? We're going to put skates on you and put you in the National Hockey League. That's not his gift. How successful do you think he would be in playing hockey or going swimming? Let's say he doesn't, he's a footballer. He's a soccer player. And you got to be careful not to stray too far from your zone of genius. And if you feel like you're always in the flow state, it's probably a zone of genius. If, however, you're struggling, well, I don't think your zone of genius is a constant struggle. I mean, you have to struggle to grow, but if it's like, oh, I have to do my zone of genius again, it's probably not your zone of genius.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it, absolutely. And to tie it personally into where you were, and then to give some broad advice, we're talking about kind of in between things, being a photographer. You realize that wasn't perhaps, not to put words in your mouth, but you realize that maybe wasn't your zone of genius because it wasn't in the flow state. It's February, it's not wedding season. You got to try to find other avenues for photography. You just don't like picking up the camera as much. You don't want to edit. You're dealing with the clients. They have different visions of what, everyone's a photographer now because they got cell phones. So they have different ideas about how they want their pictures to look. So you move on to this and you find what may have been considered appalling or something, in the past. That was maybe the way it was described. So you find this general zone of genius. But there are a lot of people, maybe not unlike you, that didn't have the wherewithal to move into this direction so easily and find that flow state. So we have a lot of people out there that come to youroneself.com, taraneal.com, that are wayward, struggling, maybe underemployed, in between work. They're down on themselves, disorganized mentally, and their immediate environment, getting started is something that we see time and time again is one of the biggest challenges with the people that we try to help. So what's the one key step, that first initial I'm on my way to, being Mr. Productivity Junior? What's the one thing that, you tell most people to get them started on that journey towards, productivity and time management?
First thing I tell people, and this is the first thing I talk to my clients about, is clarity. Most people think they're clear, and when I start talking to them, they realize really quickly that they're not. And I think doesn't matter if we're talking about productivity and time management, we're talking about health and wellness, we're talking about spirituality, we're talking about, you name it. You have to get clear. And I just tell people, get a journal, get a notebook. I highly suggest you don't do this electronically. Go someplace quiet, bring a bottle of water, listen to some maybe ambient music, like, I don't know, waves, water, whatever. So there's not music that is, you're singing to. And just allow the thoughts to come out of your subconscious mind. Don't judge them. Don't say, oh, no, I'm not thinking about that. Just write down everything, because it's called a brain dump. But when people do this, they are really surprised. Like, wow, I haven't thought about that in years, because they're so busy, or they're on these things called a phone, endlessly scrolling on social media, endlessly checking the news, endlessly playing games, endlessly streaming stuff. And you don't give your subconscious mind the opportunity to say, hey, you had this dream 10 years ago, and you were all excited about it. But I'm still back here. I'm still, hi, I'm back here. And I think if people give themselves the gift of giving themselves clarity, they would be surprised at what comes forth. Because we have a lot of things in our subconscious mind that we always said, well, someday I'm going to do it. So we have this compartment in our brain that says someday, and it's probably chock full of ideas, and that could be your next $1 million idea.
Excellent.
And we are very big proponents of writing things down, because like you're saying, in the digital age, like we start having all this stuff floating around here, and it's not really any good. And then we don't know what's ours and what's not. So when we're writing, there is that connectivity, I believe, from our heart, what we say, mind, body, spirit, onto the paper. What would you say for somebody, though, like with the brain dump, that is starting to like get out also the subconscious fears of like, I can't do it, like I'm not smart, or whatever their negative, like, can you explain the brain dump a little bit more? Like, do they cross those out? Do they like talk them out? Or how do they get rid of those ones that sneak in there in between the potential ideas and dreams and hopes?
What I encourage people to do is, after you think you have gotten everything down in the page or pages, depending on how you're going to do that.
It could be a whole half a journal.
Right. What you have to do, this is the danger spot, because you're going to think you're done, and I think you probably are in alignment with this. But all the really good gold nuggets are going to be after the pause. So you're going to be writing, and then you're going to like, that's it. No, wait. And maybe a couple minutes, maybe a half an hour. But I promise you, if you're willing to wait, don't pick up your phone, don't talk to anybody. But if you're willing to you're willing to be patient and wait, you're going to get the really good stuff that's all the way in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
And when those come through, you're probably going to get excited about 1, 2, or 3 of these.
Yeah.
Circle them. And then this is something I learned from Gary Vaynerchuk and other people. Then you go to YouTube and you look at the first topic. Let's say it's organic farming. You type in organic farming, you sort by the most popular views. You watch about 2 hours of those videos. Then you go to Amazon and you search for the most popular books on that topic. You get them and you read them. And as you're watching the videos, as you're reading the books, if you feel yourself getting excited, now you've tapped into something. Keep reading, keep knowledging, and all of a sudden, wow, you got a business. But a lot of people are like, oh, you want me to go and brain dump and write all this stuff with a pen, and then you want me to go to you? It's work. Yeah, but if you look at anyone who's successful, look at all the billionaires and the hectomillionaires, they they didn't do it overnight. They were willing to put in the work. And a lot of people, they're like, well, can I just scroll on TikTok? No, put
Yeah.
down TikTok and go learn something. People don't want to put the work in. So we may have someone listening who is going to be the next Tony Robbins or going to have the cure for cancer or whatever. But you're more interested to find out what's cool on Instagram or TikTok than you are doing this exercise and really tapping into the zone of genius. That the world's going to miss out on what you have to offer it.
Yes, agreed. Definitely, 100%. I love that. And so, just to repeat that back to the listeners is the brain dump, do the brain dump, but then wait. Like we're often very uncomfortable with the silence. Oh, well, there's nothing there. And it's like we're afraid of like what might come up. But like that voice sounds a little bit different than the noise, right? So like the brain dump is like the noise and it's like you're getting rid of that. But like wait for like the subtle message that like creeps in and then like pay attention to that because it feels a little bit different. And I love how you said like, you could feel the excitement, like expansiveness when you get that idea, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, right? That's the brain dump. You're not done brain dumping, right? Keep brain dumping because you'll get to that like inspiration feeling. So thank you. I absolutely love that.
For sure.
Yeah, sure.
It's just something with my headphones, but we're good to go. All right. Yeah. So brain dump, critical, the confusion, the overwhelm, there's so many different thoughts, the distractions. I mean, especially this day and age, right? How do you had mentioned the phone, you showed yours, so you're not above being potentially distracted. I mean, it's hard to just operate or do anything without a smartphone. Let's be real. How big of a deterrent, distraction, challenge is the phone or these electronic devices that connect us to so much unnecessary information?
And I would add also, how would you suggest we use them as productivity tools as opposed to distractions?
Well, let's talk about distractions. There are two types of distractions. Ones you can control, ones you can't. So if your neighbor is going to have their roof replaced, or your city or town is going to do construction on the street in front of your house, not too much you could do about those. Like complain, you can put on some music, but if that happens, I would encourage you not to do your important work during this time. But the stuff you can control, your phone. Well, I got to believe everyone listening to this is an adult. So act like one. This phone does not control me. I control it. And I want to challenge the listener, and I want to challenge both you two.
Yeah.
Can you sit and watch a television program, a movie, a sporting event without having your phone in your hand? Many people can't. The joke in our house is I asked my wife, what does she want to listen to on TV tonight? Because she's on Instagram and she's listening.
I love that. I love
Wow.
that.
That's a good one.
How about you two?
guilty.
Okay, there you go.
I'm.
Ryan?
I mean, sometimes I'll. Yeah.
Yeah, with me, if it's a big,
And I make
honest-
excuses like, oh, I'm checking my email, or oh, I'm getting productivity done. But
Sure.
I would say that's different productivity because that's like that half-assing, excuse my French, productivity, right? Because it's not complete focus. It's like, oh, I'm paying attention to the movie, but I'm really not. So it's almost like there's something wrong with watching the movie, but maybe that's the time where you need to take a break. Could that be true?
well, work-life
Okay.
balance too. You're definitely. I mean, that's an opportunity to decompress, and you put it. You're not even going to be. You're going to be more productive if you're doing the work before or after that break. For me, being an avid sports fan, it even gets tougher with fantasy and other things, but I won't. I still like the experience of not knowing live events and the joy of that brings me, seeing things unfold and experiencing it in organically. So what I'll do is I'll separate my phone from my viewing area. So I'll leave it in a totally different room because I know I want to see the reaction like online. If there's a crazy play or what's perceived to be a bad call, right? You want to know what's going on, right? If someone you're watching a Premier League game and there's a red card or somebody gets a second yellow, right? You're going to want to probably, and it's maybe you think it's a dive or it's controversial. You might want to see what does everyone else think about this, right? So that's dangerous. Or you're watching Man U and then they're a couple points ahead of Arsenal. You might want to check the score of something else, but that's taking away from the experience to me for sure. And then, like you said,
Yeah.
just the mindless scrolling. It's definitely a challenge. And for me, separating myself from my phone, that's how I've worked around that to the best of my ability. But my wife will tell you I haven't mastered it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell
Yeah.
you one of the things I do. I'm 59 and my favorite platform is Snapchat. Okay. I love their video DMing feature. So my friend in England got me hooked on football, and it's the only sport I watch. I got
Okay.
my American football loving cousin hooked on European football. So during the games, we both love Man City. During the game, we're snapping each other back and forth. But my eyes are glued on the screen. I'm not
Right.
checking apps or anything like that because there may be a lag. When I first got the Premier League app and the Man City app, I allowed notifications and found out that, oh, they scored. I'm like, no, they haven't. And then 30 seconds later. So I turned all
No.
those notifications off because it ruins
Gotcha.
it. I'm like, man, yeah, I look at it's not just sports, though. I mean, because as you know, Brian, you can go down that X or whatever thread and now you're missing the game. But I'm also talking about people who are scrolling on Instagram while you're watching a movie. And my wife, she'll be on the couch. I'll be in the chair next to her. And she'll put the phone down, and I could see out of the corner of my eye, I'm going 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. And I'm like, oh, 6 seconds. She looks at me and she knows because I razz her all the time about it. It's not like a secret. We all do it. We put the phone down, and all of a sudden the thought pops in your head. Oh, I got to know this information right now. But people want to go, well, Mark, what if I want to look up something? Well, you get something called a notebook and a pen, and when a thought pops in your head, write it down, check later. How important is it that you go read that Wikipedia article right now? Probably zilch.
Totally.
That can also be, because I'm guilty. Like, I'm not a big social media person, but I am guilty of like, oh, I want to know that and I want to know that now. And I feel like that's also a little dopamine addiction. It's like, well, I want to know. I want to know why this is this. It's good. I mean, I do think that like that, it can lead you to good information, but I think that there's a time and a place for it. So I say that it's taking, like, I'm giving my power away still to technology when I'm grabbing that phone and I'm looking up something, like Googling something unnecessary because I want to prove my brother wrong. Like, oh no, that's actually that wasn't the score of the game 14 years ago when we were 12 and we were watching it. Like, so yeah, I think that these are distractions. And this is what I love, Mark, about your work is you're bringing mindfulness to your clients and your listeners and to our listeners, and you're spreading that in a way that it's not like, it doesn't have to be connected to a specific spiritual practice. Like, this is mindfulness in being present in what you're doing. Like, if you love sports, be there and do that and experience it with the people that you care about and you love. And the same thing with like searching on your phone or being outside and enjoying nature, but having to like snap the pictures at that moment. So it's really, would you say it's about awareness and mindfulness in all that you do?
Oh, you brought up a topic that's really a raw nerve for me, and that's about being present. We've all gone to Christmas services, and the kids are up there singing, and the parents aren't enjoying the moment. They all have their phones, taking videos, and they're experiencing the moment through their phone. And I want to ask people, how many times later do you go back and watch that video or take those pictures? You missed the moment. Your kid is looking out at you in the congregation, and they don't see you. They see your phone.
Yeah.
Live in the moment. Take a quick shot. Click, put the phone down,
absolutely.
and be there for your child. We all see it. We see it on concert. People go to concerts and they're recording the concert. It's not going to be as good when you watch the replay in your phone later than it was in the moment.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. So we get the brain dump, we work on getting the clarity piece. They realize, wow, they had so much on their mind. There's so much that they had wanted to do that maybe they haven't gotten done. But there is that sense of relief, that cleansing experience that the writing everything out does. So next step. So now, what's key? I mean, if they could only adhere to one when you want to change something totally, you're not going to have someone do, all right, these 10 things you have to do tomorrow and for the rest of the week, right? That's going to cause another sense of overwhelm, right? And then just be too much and make them more anxious. So what are some critical starters where, you're like, all right, you need to get this down, whether it's a routine or it's a checklist or it's something you're consistently doing each day. What's the first introductory step to productivity success?
My favorite number 1. Pick one thing. And I can't give you or the listener that one thing.
Okay.
You probably look at the listener's going, you gave me 13 ideas to think about today. Okay. Pick one to start with. I don't care what it is. It could be a morning routine, a bedtime routine. It could be journaling. It could be exercising. Pick one thing, but don't pick something that is like, oh, I don't want to do it. Pick something easy to give you the easy win.
Mm-hmm.
So people ask me, man, you have a really extensive morning routine you do every day. Yeah, but it didn't start that way. I started with one component of my morning routine. Okay. Then I add another and add another. So I don't want to give, that's when people ask me, like, when I talk about the journaling, I don't do it for 16 minutes. Look, until you get enough stuff on the page. Because if you give people absolutes, they they got to do this exact same thing for this much time. No, I don't tell you that. Pick one thing that you're not doing now that if you do it, you feel would give you an advantage to start the day. And it's something easy to give you the easy win. But Tara's one thing could be different than Brian's, who could be different than the listener. So I don't want to be absolute and tell people do this one thing. But let's be honest. We're all adults here. We know what one thing is that we could do. Maybe you put your kids to bed at 7:30 and you're staying up to midnight watching sporting events and all that stuff. Maybe you're like, you know what? I'll watch this on a replay tomorrow, which will take me less time, and I'll go to bed at 8 o'clock with my kids so I get more sleep. I mean, that's why I like European football, because I'm 6 hours behind. So their 3 o'clock in the afternoon games are 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday for me. So I don't watch late night sports because they don't do late night sports over there for me, because for a 6 o'clock game, it'll be midnight. They're not going to play a game over midnight over there in Europe. But I just encourage the listener, and you're going to know what that one thing is. What is that one easy thing you can do starting today that you can start getting your life back in order? And at the end of the show, I'm going to tell you how I can help you for free. So stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So you could say that, almost having to redefine productivity, right? So productivity isn't just filling your day with useless or unimportant tasks to check off. It's more about what's going to be meaningful. So you could say, do this one thing for you that's going to benefit for you and stick to it. So could you also say that productivity and consistency and specificity to that person overlaps?
100%. I mean, I have never had two clients with the exact same problems. We all have different lives. My wife and I are empty nesters with 2 dogs. You may have 7 kids and your in-laws living in your house. Everyone's different. And that's why I like what I do. I like what I do because everyone's different. I couldn't imagine if I gave the same answer to every client. It'd be like, oh, yeah, Tara, just blah, blah, blah. I'd be bored.
Right.
But every client is different. Every interview I do on my podcast is different. Every time I'm a guest on someone else's show, it's different because y'all ask me different questions, which is great. I think variety is the spice of life. And so every day is different for me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned early morning getting started. You have this intricate, well-developed and honed morning routine. Some of the challenges people face being consistent, like Tara had said. So I know it's summertime and a lot of people listening are parents or teachers or whatever it is. Their schedule's a little bit different in the summer, right? Especially if you have the kids. How do you, even from like say a Monday through Thursday, Friday to the weekend, is it important to keep that consistency as far as the bedtime and the wake up schedule or getting things done? Because you don't want to just have it be a 5-day plan and then 2 days you fall off and then you're struggling to get started again, or 10 months out of the year and then the summer it's just a free for all. Can you talk about some of those challenges and why consistency in that regard may or may not be important?
The body loves consistency. And I know this is going to bother a lot of people, but it's a fact. So I go to bed. So 5:30 in the evening, I stop. That's when I cut off for food. 6:30, I cut off water. 7:30, I cut off screens. I journal and read until 8:30, and I sleep until 4:30, 5 o'clock. I do it 7 days a week. I do it on holidays and vacations. And you get in a little tempo. Now, a lot of people will do that Sunday night through Friday morning, and then they go out partying or clubbing on Friday night and sleeping. They'll do it on Saturday, and they do it again Saturday night. And then they wonder why they're struggling Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then Thursday comes along, they're just getting their groove. Oh, here comes another party on Friday.
Yeah.
Your body loves consistency. Is it easy? No. But I once heard, I think it was Grant Cardone said, he says, nothing good happens after 9 o'clock at night anyways. So I go to bed so late. Everything on TV, including sporting events, including if you're into politics and you like watching the keynote addresses or debates, you can watch them in the replay the next day. What is that more important? Is it really more important, or is it more important that you get enough sleep, or you read a book, or you hang out with your significant other? We all have to make our own choices. I'm not going to tell the listener what you should do. I'm telling you, it's a scientific fact. The body loves consistency.
Awesome. How, like, first now we got evidence. You kind of been your own study in that regard. Before you were so disciplined with the nighttime ritual and then getting up early in the AM consistently, like you said, two things. How do you feel differently now, just physically, mentally, in any capacity? And then also, how do you overcome externals trying to fight you off that schedule, or other people saying, "Oh, come on, spring break or whatever, it's New Year's, it's the holidays.
Live a little.
Come on, it's Black Friday, we're going to go to the store, we're going to come home, we're going to, hang out. Your schedule is nice, but a couple days is no big deal." Has this changed how you feel physically, mentally, and otherwise? And how do you fight off people that are trying to deviate you from your flow state?
Well, I used to be one of these people. I'd go to bed whenever and get up whenever, especially after I was fired in my job in 2005. I'm like, hey, I can go to bed whenever I want and get up whenever I want. It doesn't matter. Well, I noticed that my energy level was never consistent. So I wake up at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I stop working at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because my battery's about 20% by then, because I worked all day. So I feel great now. And what changed it all for me was a book by Robin Sharma called The 5 a.m. Club. I read the book like 3 times already. And it's a story with a lot of lessons in it. And I'm like, 5 a.m., is this guy crazy? And then he talks about sometimes he gets up at 4:30. Well, if you go to bed at 8:30, getting up that early is not that hard. But if you go to bed at 11, it's kind of hard to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I just tell people, are you making excuses? Have you ever tried it? I mean, do you really want to be a member of the 5 a.m. club? By the way, there's no magic. If your prime time is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this may not work for you. Maybe you're a night owl. But if people tell me I really want to be in the 5 a.m. club, but I'm like, stop. Okay, you're going to make an excuse. But I have kids, but I have my in-law. There's ways around it. You can make it work if you really want to make it work. When people tell me they don't have time, you have time. You lack priorities. You lack discipline, but you have time.
Yes.
And I tell people, if you want to develop a rock solid morning routine, well, how about you don't start with, but I can't do this. Listen, start with a blank slate. I've got a whiteboard behind me. It's blank right now. So if I have some ideas, I get my markers and I start jotting things idea. So instead of starting with, hey, this won't work because, start with a blank slate and say, this is what I would like to be able to do. How can I make it happen?
And
Awesome.
your subconscious will see that and it'll find a way to make it happen. And so I love that's, yes, I think our default is like, but I can't do that. So write down what it is that you want to happen and you'll find a way to do it. And that's why there is a lot of value behind writing down even the old school vision board, that like seeing that, the RAS, right? The reticular activating system
Yep.
is a real thing, right? And so,
Mhm.
these are such valuable tools and practices. And we suggest, try something for 30 days. Like, would you agree? Like, people that are saying, well, I can't do this, I guess. Like, I think it takes away some of the fear. If like, you don't have to do it for the rest of your life. If you do it for 30 days and it doesn't work, at least you can say like, well, that doesn't work for me. Whereas opposed to like, well, that doesn't work for me. Well, did you try it? No. So it is
Mhm.
kind of challenging people to say like, is that true?
Yeah, that's very, very true. I read a book about a year ago called Built to Move, and they talked about hip flexors. And as we get older, our hip flexors aren't so flexible anymore. And so they talk about this hip flexor exercise where, when you see kids, they squat down and their butt almost hits the floor.
Mm.
Most adults can't do that anymore. Well, I'm like, I'm going to try doing this. So I did it the first day, right? I'm like, oh, this is a piece of cake. The next day I went to do it. My body goes, whoa, wait a minute, dude. We're going to do this every day now? And I went through about 2 weeks of discomfort. Then my hip flexors got to be more flexible. Now I do 4 to 6 minutes. Doesn't bother me at all. But I had to work through that tough time. A lot of people do things, and the first sign of any pain or discomfort, not meant to be. No, maybe you're meant to go through the
That's
discomfort
so
to get to
true.
the other side. Everyone wants to
So
stop
true.
right away.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so critical, And we could tell you're that window 6:30 to 8 where you mentioned a couple books and you got some insights there. I mean, that's why it's so much more important to read and to gain knowledge from others rather than, a sitcom that you've seen the same episode 3 or 4 times where you're just mindlessly watching it, right? 10, 11 o'clock. But you mentioned the hip flexor exercise and, especially with people that, it's a little hypocritical for us, but that sit down all the time, right? We are sitting down for this part of, our job, but, with a lot of desk jobs and people sitting behind a computer and at a desk all day, our whole, hip, spine, back, all that part of us is kind of twisted and unnaturally set up. And it's kinetically, our body is just kind of not the way it's designed to have been. And that's why we, like you had said, the older we get, the more we struggle with those areas. So it's truly important. On that note, where we got that Mr. Productivity is going to help us out, will give us some guidance free of charge at the end of the episode. But can you give us a little, like a nugget? Like, well, what is a critical ingredient to that morning routine? Is it something that you definitely, this part of your diet set up that you have to eat something? Is it a, meditative mindfulness moment or moments that you have? Is it some body movement or some exercise? What's something that you really just can't do without, or you're going to be a little bit off for the rest of the morning or the rest of the day?
Really quick answer on this one. Just get up and move. And I don't mean pick up your phone. I mean move. I don't care if
Okay.
it's lifting weights. I have some dumbbells in my bedroom. Walking, if you got a long hallway, walking up and down the hallway,
Okay.
maybe doing a couple push-ups or squatting. Just move because you've been sleeping for 6, 7, hopefully between 7 and 9 hours.
Mhm.
So get up and move. Don't do something crazy. I'm not saying go run a marathon, but get up and maybe do some stretches. Or I have a
Mhm.
rebounder. Go a rebounder. Get on the stationary bike. Put on
Okay.
some music. Dance around the house if everybody's awake. But move. I can't overemphasize. Be careful, but get up and move as soon as you can after you wake up.
Love it. So true. And that's, what we try to preach here, the mind, body, spirit. It definitely connects and you feel, more mentally kind of energized too, right? When your body starts moving, it's all connected. So then you waking up. Tara, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, yeah. I think, we have a to-do list in our mind. The last thing we need to do is grab our phone and get into more of a fight or flight, fearful state. So if we give that space to like have that mind-body connection and like loosen up and that to me, that's a spiritual experience, right? Like it doesn't have to be this grandiose like hour meditation or yoga. I mean, I love yoga, but like that's my movement. But it doesn't have to be. It can be like you walk around the block, jump up and down. So I agree. Like you said, our body has been in one position for a while. We need to wake up all the circuits. It's a bottom up approach too, right? It's like you wake up the body and then the mind will wake up. So
Yeah,
that's cool. Thanks.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much we could have you on forever, and
Yeah.
definitely would in the and hope to in the future as you head to 14, 1700, 2000. I
Yeah.
mean, who knows where it ends, Mark.
Yeah.
So we talked a lot about morning routine. We talked about just kind of overcoming a stasis where you at least get yourself a foot in the door of this journey. But I've heard you in previous podcasts and clips that you've made speak about a nighttime routine or a bedtime ritual and how they're so important because it is that you talk about a reflection piece. And I think three components of it: a reflection of the day, gratitude, but it also counterintuitive to some that aren't used to this productivity, how it does prep you for the next day and moving forward. So even though it's the end of the day, some of the things that you do during that bedtime routine and ritual help you to get started. You're putting in the work to be successful the next day. So can you speak a little to the importance of that experience?
Well, I really don't have anything to add. You said it so eloquently. I mean, you're not prepping yourself for bedtime. You're prepping yourself for tomorrow because you're prepping yourself to get a good quality night's sleep. I think the way you laid it out, I mean, I can't do it justice to add anything to that.
Excellent.
And
I have
absolutely.
one last question before we wrap things up. You have this like impressive drive within you. To me, it's like your soul shines through. I'm curious, was there a moment in the last 7 years that you woke up and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I want to quit. And and you don't have to share, but we like to do like something behind the curtain, right? Like, did you ever have this like moment, emotional, like, maybe, you're in the shower and you're just like having that, like, you know what, forget it. This is like, and if so, how did you overcome that? And how did you get yourself out of that?
I never felt like I wanted to quit. I felt, and I still do, experience imposter syndrome. I can't believe I've got a podcast over 7 years old. Can't believe I'm on your show. I can't believe I have clients. I can't believe people follow me on social media because I'm like, who am I? And so I never wanted to quit. I wake up every morning like a little child on Christmas morning. Couldn't wait to see what Santa brought. I'm a little disappointed there's not presents next to my bed when I wake up every morning. But yeah, for me, it's not quitting. It's the imposter syndrome angle.
Okay. But it sounds though like you actually kind of reframe the imposter syndrome to gratitude, right? Like,
yeah,
that to me sounds like a lot of gratitude in that. So thank you. We are also grateful for you and inspired, and just really blessed to have you.
On that note, how do you stay with so much recording and helping so many people and the clients and the advice and doing your own homework and research? How do you stay? What is that pot at the end of the rainbow? Where does that why come from, or where are you headed? And because you have, from the outside looking in, it seems like you're just Mr. Productivity. You're accomplishing so much. Where does that come from, or where are you headed?
Simple answer, I love life. I'm grateful every day I wake up, and I know a lot of people say, do all this, soul searching. I just wake up excited for the day.
Yeah.
I mean, really excited for the day. I don't overcomplicate it. I love life. I fully anticipate living to 110, 120 years old. And so I want to serve as many of the humankind as I can. So that's what my why is.
That's beautiful. Thank
Awesome.
you for sharing that.
Well, we do have a question that we do like to ask everyone. It's going to be easy for you because you already mentioned two great ones. What's one of the most recent books that you've read, or maybe the last one you've read, that you think would benefit our listeners in their journey to becoming their best selves?
I would encourage people to read The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. You will get tremendous value out of the book, but I don't want you to go get the book and say, I don't want to get up at 5 o'clock. Again, remember, let's start the book with a blank slate. Read the book. It convinced me to be a morning person, to be a 5 a.m.er, okay? So go get the book. But any book you read, don't go into it with any preconceived notions. Go into the book saying, I wonder what this book can teach me. And you may be surprised what you learn.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you so much. We have been listening to the advice of Mr. Productivity, aka Mark Struczewski, from the Mr. Productivity podcast, 1,200 plus episodes and going strong. Mark, where can people find out more about you? You had said that there was a little special offer for our listeners, so we're really excited to hear about that.
Yeah, just go to MrProductivity.com, MISTER, MrProductivity.com. At the top of the page, you'll see a big, right now it's an orange button. Hopefully I won't change the color. And you can sign up for a free 30-minute, what I call efficiency breakthrough session. It's free, no obligation. Obviously, I want to give you tons of value, but hopefully that I'll blow your socks off and you want to become a client, but that's not required. So just go to MrProductivity.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for helping out every listener and viewer of ours. And, thank you what you've been doing for the past 7 years. And here's to 7 more.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Looking forward to connecting again soon. Thank you, Mark.